Good evening. Welcome to my channel. Good evening. Um, Hope you're enjoying your weekend. Hope you're doing okay. We have been talking about the cost of living. We have been operating for 4 weeks now. We are 1 month old, and we started this channel 10 years ago. We have been dormant. We are now active. We've been talking about the cost of living because it's topical, but I've been approaching the cost of living from different points of view. I've been looking at the UK government because it's the government which gives the support for the cost of living. So there are people who want specific help. Give me a comment. Let me know what you really would be interested in the coming weeks and months. I will be looking at more and more specifics in the UK, and I already said it before that what happens in the UK is happening everywhere. To try and illustrate that point, I've been looking at something called globalization. I talked about it in my last video. If you watch it, you will find some really interesting points about globalization. And people need to know the political element because it is politics which produces the state. The state produces welfare within the public sector setting. I've actually also said in previous video that the public sector has been closed down and capitalism has replaced socialism in the global economy, including Britain, including the Western countries, the East, America, the Middle East, and Africa. Everywhere you go now, you will be talking about the global economy, and that is something I'll be talking about is the political dimension of the cost of living, because people need to know this. People also have to realize that the best source of health is yourself. You are the best source of yourself, your family, your community. Don't neglect your life. Don't neglect your family. Don't neglect your community. You need to remember this. And I have actually made suggestions in the past video to say we need to actually revisit our cultural identity, our cultural precepts. We need to be respectful to ourselves. We need to really change culturally because we cannot be like everybody else. There are a divide between two countries, the countries of the rich, the country of the poor, globally, nationally. And there is no turning back, and the poor people form between 80 to 90%. If you work for a living, you're poor. And the government is no longer helping. There are help which are temporary, and it's getting harder and harder to get help. I'll be talking to you about the available help in the UK, and go to your government website in the country you are in to find out what help is available given by your government. But you need to understand that society has changed. The public sector is closing down. It has closed down now. What is left is just residue. If you understand the meaning of residue, what is left is leftover. So it's all but it's closed now, and that's why there is a cost of living. The main source of cost of living, the main reason there's a cost of living crisis, because the government has closed down the public sector. The war in Ukraine could be treated as something which is expected as a crisis, but what creates the cost of living crisis and all the other economic crises where people cannot access food, people cannot access energy is because the government used to help people via the public sector, the welfare state, social services. All of these have closed. What is left is temporary, is going to disappear because as a government policy and program is already gone. The NHS is not there, the employment is not there, because all these are actually social welfare state. Employment, education, transportation, and social security. These have closed down because the public sector have closed down. What we have is now the private sector. And the private sector, when the government talks in the UK of leveling up, it means taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich, because that is an economic argument for stability. If many people have money, the state is going to be unstable. The state cannot rule over people if they are rich. That's why there are only a few select within capitalism, which is actually the global system of the state, economic system of the state. Capitalism. And I also said in the other videos that people should not really think the government is established, whether in the past, whether in modern times. The government, the main purpose is to rule over people. You are slaves. You're not citizen. If you are rich, then you're a citizen. Because the thing is, if the government doesn't respect you, you cannot be a citizen. So the answer is that there are two answers to the questions for people who are rich and poor, because we want peace. See, the idea of society is peace. Existence is about peace. Nothing else. Everybody is working for peace. And if we are actually to take control of our lives, we are going to have to work for peace. And peace simply means we need to do two things. One, we have to access wealth. If you're poor, access wealth. And we are 80% of the population being poor across the globe. And get wealth, do business. The only way to get rich, or even access some semblance of wealth is actually through doing business. You can be working now. If you're lucky, you will work until you retire, but there's no guarantee anymore. The condition of work may be good for you. You may be being paid. Maybe you are being paid well. That is fine. Do your work, and if you can, invest in business. If you can, if you cannot, think of something, because government is no longer helping anyone. The help available is so difficult to get because of the same problem. It's symbolic. It's there. If you go online on government website, the help is there, but to get it is almost impossible. Energy, people will not be able to access food and energy because these are provided by the government, by the public sector. Public sector has closed down. You have to look for food. You have to look for energy. You have to look for employment. Everything provided. We used to take many things in this country for granted. It's gone. Housing is gone. You see, and private sector is also closing down. They are leaving enough economy for the rich, for the few, not the many, because the ruling argument is that, the governing argument. Let me use that term. Governing argument is that the few should have power, and power is related to wealth. That's why you are not supposed to have wealth, because you are not a ruler in this country. You are not in the government. The ruling class, which are actually about 10 or 15% of the population. These are actually council of rulers, like the royal family, politicians, super rich. These are the people who rule this country, politically and economically. If you are not included, then you have to really find a way. I don't know what the future holds, but I think let us really try our best to access wealth in the first place. In the second, let us actually revisit our cultural approaches to society, to peace, where we have to take initiative to respect ourselves, to respect others. That is culture. These are the two sources of solutions to our problem. Access wealth and respect yourself and respect others, and you'll be okay. And we'll see what the future brings. Technology is also coming. When technology matures, it's going to take over running the economy. And when it is 100% functional, where it produces goods and services at no extra cost, that will mean the economy have to really be shut down because there is no need. Economy only makes logic with trade, buying and selling product. If you get things for free, that's the end of the economic age. Then we enter into technological age, which is a good thing, and that's why there's optimism in terms of wealth. But it doesn't mean if we have wealth, we are going to have health. See, health only comes when we achieve peace, and peace is a combination of wealth and health. Health is accessed culturally through education. We learn how to be peaceful. If we learn war, we can learn peace. That is a sign of hope. People can learn, people can change. I covered this in the previous video. Going forward in the next few days and weeks, hopefully, to go and try to explain what globalization means. And I need people to pay attention because that's the politics of the cost of living. And you cannot really understand or even solve problem with the cost of living. For now, look at yourself, your family, and your community going forward, because the cost of living is not going where. It's a problem. It's a crisis. It might change for better or for worse, but as a broad concept, it's going to be there. And you have to look after yourself and look after your family, look after your community. That's why I say it's a cultural, what I call the cultural economy. You may not understand the terminology because that is what I've decided to call it, cultural economy, which means cultural development, which means human element of progress. That's what I'm trying to talk about. Some people may or may not know about it. So I'm going to go through a material to give you an idea what globalization might look like. And normally globalization is actually the states are coming together as one in the world, in the globe. Britain, America, African countries, all the continents are becoming like one country. So the world is going to be one. The government is going to come together. The rich are going to come together with other rich people around the world. Politicians will come together as politicians. The businesses will come together as businesses. Poor people will come together as poor people. But the rich will grow richer in wealth. The powerful in government will go richer and in power. The ruling class, which are actually politicians, including the royal family, will collude with the collusion is sound very awkward word to use. They will unite. Let me use that word. They're going to unite the government. People like ministers, politicians, and prime ministers of head of state in America, in China. They're going to unite as ruling class, and the CEOs of big companies, managing directors, shareholders, multi-millionaires, they will all unite as one unit of rulers. And then they're going to elect one individual to rule over the ruling class, who will continue to rule over the working class. Because the working class, actually the poor, they should be renamed because they might not be working anymore because of capitalism. I've said it elsewhere that the capitalism doesn't create wealth. They create money for themselves. They don't even help other people. Culturally, they are not allowed. Rich people are not allowed to help poor people because poor people is a security risk. You don't help your enemy because poor people are very dangerous to rich people because they can rob them Some of them are resentful. Why are you rich and we're poor? So it's a major issue. And that's why, as human species, we have to learn peace first and fast. We have to resort back to our culture and learn peace. If we don't, then we're going to be in trouble. We are in trouble. It's a case of now trying to move very quickly and sort out our culture from violence to peace. Simple as that. And that is what globalization, all the wicked people of the world are going to unite. The powerful and the poor. Those are the two categories of people, the rich and the poor. All the wealthy people who rule over the poor are going to congregate the government, the economic empires of the world, the financial institution. They are going to unite as one person and begin to rule as a family of rulers. And they are going to continue to exclude those who are not allowed to enter where the ruling class is. And that is the change. That is the reform. That is what globalization means. Religion is part of it. Take, for example, in the UK, King Charles III is the head of the Church of England. If you think I'm correct, then leave a message below. If you think I'm wrong, leave a message below as well. Subscribe to my channel to support it. It's free. You don't pay. You just click and subscribe to support my channel and share it with your family, friends. Just support the channel. Leave a comment below and let me know what you want. If you need a specific topic to me to talk about a specific topic, leave a comment below. And for my purpose, I will be talking about anything relating to the freedom of speech, because that's why I started my channel, to promote free speech. And the cost of living, talking about it is a form of free speech, because I believe if we speak, we solve problems. That it's like a medicine. So when we're looking for help with the cost of living, we should be talking to our family, to friends. Build your community. That is a solution. The biggest source of solution is actually you. Like I said, the government is not helping you anymore. If you go to the hospital, you're going to find it hard. If you go to work, the employers are going to be harder. They're going to want to pay you less. They're going to want to pay to squeeze your right. I mean, the employment right is disappearing. It's just semantics. Still there, but it's disappearing. There is no future for employment rights for any poor person. And rich people don't work. They don't have to. And capitalism is investing in technology. That's a good thing. It's going to create wealth, no doubt. And globalization is going to increase wealth. But these wealth are for the poor, for the few, but not the many. So the features of globalization will be things. People will be migrating. There will be worlds without borders. And the immigration control will go. But if you don't have money, you cannot travel because you can't afford air tickets. So I don't think poor people will travel. They will be living in one space. If you're in Britain, you might not even go to Scotland because you won't have money. I mean, if you're lucky to be in a house, you can't even be on the street. Because the street, you're not allowed to live on the street. You're going to be arrested. Maybe the government will set up a concentration camp and put poor people there because they won't be able to afford rent, and no one is going to give them a house for free. The government is no longer there. The government is closed down. So private companies will be the one running the country. There will be private government. There's something called corporate governance. It's global as well. It's going to be global as well. People don't listen. I mean, people don't want to listen. There is something called good governance. It's with the NGOs and the CBOs and its charities. It's good governance. If you don't demonstrate good governance, you don't get funding. There is something called uh, corporatization. That is the private business, big businesses. There is something called the board of directors or the board system. That is like parliament, private parliament. And then there is called corporate governance. That is actually private government. So they are selling of even the government, they're selling of the state, they're selling of the country, they're selling of the globe to the rich. There's nowhere to run for anyone. If you're in Africa, if you are in, it's a global community and it's preserved for the rich. For the rich, if you're a poor person who is lucky, if you meet an alien and speak to an alien, maybe you can go to their world if they exist. I don't know if the aliens are there. Otherwise, you have to really live here and hope that you access wealth. Start now. I'm talking about the future more than the present, but it's beginning now. The signs are shown. The signs are coming with the cost of living. That is a sign that what I'm saying is going to happen 50 years, 100 years, 200 years time. It's not going to happen today. You may not even notice it, but I'm I'm mentioning this because the you see, the public sector is now closed. What is left will maybe exist less and less and less and less, and it will disappear. 50 years, 100 years to come. I'm saying this so that you understand why it's so difficult to. Why taking your children to school is so costly. School uniforms, school meals. In most councils still give school meals, but many councils are now not providing school uniform. They should, but because the system has changed, there's no funding. So now the government is closing down one thing. School meals, even school meals. In some school, children have to take food from school. I mean, it means tested. I mean, if you're not on benefit, every child should be provided for in school. I don't think it's like that anymore. You need to be really like getting some benefit for your child to eat food. But with benefit, you probably get some help from the local authority for school uniform. I've actually covered it in the video, so I'll be continuing to cover the specifics of benefit in the UK. Some people don't like this topic because they say they work, but I say benefit help people in work more than people who are out of work. And people are just have to be really aware. I mean, if don't think that benefit is for people who are not working. Yes, it is, but it's more for people who work. The government even say that they want to use benefit to help those who are in work more than those who are out of work. So you have to really learn to listen. So people will be moving around. You see, um, so people will be moving around the world, and you will be seeing institutions of the global system, like the United Nations. Many people may not see European Union. People may not really realize that the EU is at the heart of globalization. It's going to control the global finance. It is controlling global finance. London, for example, is replacing New York as for now, because America is number one economically, and China. But it's all change. It's going to change. It's going to be Europe, London, leading in global finance, and global finance is going to lead global economy. People need to be aware. So all those facts, you can go online, you can watch videos like this one. I'm not claiming this is really a learning material, but I am developing it because we are 4 weeks old. Developing it into something similar. You can get information from my channel. Going forward, that means I have to do a lot more work. So in the coming days and weeks, I will be exploring the idea behind globalization, And there's something called Commonwealth, relationship between former colonies, between Britain and other places. And it's going to be, like I said, worldwide. Um, so I will try to go through this material just to make people happy. If you can make you happy, then that's fine. Let me just see what they're saying. So the term globalization first appeared in the early 20th century, supplanting an earlier French term, mondialization, developed its current meaning sometimes in the second half of the 20th century and came into popular use in the 1990s to describe the unprecedented international connectivity of the post Cold War world. Like what I've been saying. The origins can be traced back to 18th and 19th centuries due to advances in transportation and communications technology. These increases in global interactions has caused a growth in international trade and the exchange of ideas, beliefs, and culture. Globalization is primarily an economic process of interaction and integration that is associated with social and cultural aspects. However, disputes and international diplomacy are also large parts of the history of globalization and of modern globalization. Economically, globalization involves goods, services, data, technology, and the economic resources of capital. The expansion of global um, markets liberalizes the economic activity of the exchange of goods and funds. Removal of cross-border trade barriers has made the formation of global markets more feasible. Advances in transportation like the steam locomotive, steamship, jet engines, and container ships, and developments in telecommunication infrastructure like the telegraph, internet, mobile phone, and smartphones have been major factors in globalization and have generated further interdependence of economic and cultural activities around the globe. This is some of the outlook of what globalization might look like. Interdependence means if you produce one good and depend on yourself, you depend more on other countries. That's the logic surrounding globalization. That's through though many scholars place the origins of globalization in modern time, others traces its history long before the European age of discovery and voyages to the naval world, to the new world, and some even to the third millennium BC. That globalization start. Some people opinion are divided. Some people think it is a modern phenomenon, but others say no. It started many years ago. Large scale globalization began in the 1820s, and in the late 19th century and early 20th century drove a rapid expansion in the connectivity of the world's economies and cultures. So, economic phenomena and cultural incidences have actually coalesced to formulate what is now the global economic system. The term global city was subsequently popularized by sociologist Saskia Session in her work The Global City, New York, London, Tokyo, 1991. In 2000, the International Monetary Fund (IMF) identified four basic aspects of globalization: trade and transactions, capital and investment movement, migration and movement of people, and dissemination of knowledge. So you got the knowledge economy and its movement and its interactions, capital and investment, migration and movement of people. So you get those elements, those factors will be recurring throughout along the topic of globalization. Academic literature commonly divides globalization into three major areas: economic globalization, cultural globalization, and political globalization. So you see knowledge researchers on every aspect of school of thought or practices are giving definition to the global economic phenomenon and system, and look at it as an incident of history occurring in early modern and modern time. You look at globalization in terms of the economic, the cultural, political, and you look at it in terms of gender and other dimensions. You also look at globalization in terms of um, um, uh, in terms of movement of people, of information, and also globalization involves movement, believe it or not, of diseases people carry, like COVID-19 came from China. And we studies can also look at how you measure globalization, and you also can look at people who support it and people who don't support it. So it divides opinion as a phenomenon because it's so huge and it's here to stay. So that's what I was talking about. And you look at the economics and democracy, you look at the civic element, how people understand citizenship, for example, the global citizenship, that is civics. Global civics is look at cooperation, like, people are trying to work together in common, in common in tandem. You could say, there are people who do not want it. There are movement, people who have actually created organization to oppose globalization. Some people look at it as an extension of capitalism to actually give more fuel and power to capitalism, and they oppose it, or they also support it. Other people look at globalization as a form of consumerism, selling and buying, being greedy for things and buying and more and more. Some people look at it as an expansion of corporatism. Corporatism is actually creating bigger businesses to run the economy under capitalism. That's what capitalization means. And it also encourages consumerism. And you're looking at justice and inequality. Those issues as in law, as in social justice, inequalities, and things like that. And also, you're talking about global governance. Like I said before, world governments are actual congregation to form a super state and super governments. There are those who are for and against people. There are people who don't like it. And also, these groups or environmentalists who actually see globalization as a problem, some of them may even see it as an opportunity to improve good governance in terms of global environmental protection. So you're looking at food security in countries like Norway, who actually seen as a country depending on imports of product and good. Um, so I'm gonna cut on a little bit if you mind, if you don't mind, because I've already explained it in broad. I'm just looking at this material to give you an idea what it might look like, but it's just a taster of what might or might not be discussed in this channel. So the word globalization was used in the English language as early as the 1930s, but only in the context of education, and the term failed to gain traction. Over the next few decades, the term was occasionally used by other scholars and media, but it was not clearly defined. One of the first uses of the term in the meaning resembling the later commonly used was by French economist Francois Perrault in his essay from the early 1960s. In his French works, he used the term modernization literally meaning modernization, whatever it is, also translated as mondialization. These are some of the terminologies used featuring the incident or the phenomenon of the global empire. Theodore Levitt is often credited with popularizing the term and bringing it into the mainstream business audience in the Middle East in the middle of 1980s. Since its inception, the concept of globalization has inspired competing definitions and interpretations. Its antecedents date back to the great movements of trade and empire across Asia and Indian Ocean from the 15th century onward. Due to the complexity of the concept, various research projects, articles, and discussion often stay focused on a single aspect of globalization. In 1848, Karl Marx noticed the increasing level of national interdependence brought on by capitalism and predicted the universal character of the modern world society. He states the bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie has, through its exploitation of the world market, given a cosmopolitan character of production and consumption in every country. So the bourgeoisie is actually the ruling class, as it were, in some context, in some kind of like intellectual or academic discourses or theoretical propositions. The bourgeoisie are the class of people who are actually considered to be the upper classes who rule over other people, and they are associated with exploitation of world market. Cosmopolitan actually comes from the word cosmos and politan. Politan is like cities and civil centers, which are actually global. Cosmos is in the global context. So you find this characterization and languages featuring the incident of a global economy, the global economic system. So the great chagrin of reactionists, it has drawn from under the feet of industry and national ground on which it stood. All established national industries have been destroyed or are daily being destroyed in place of all local and national seclusion and self-sufficiency. We have intercourse in every direction, universal interdependence of nations. Interdependence is you could say, is a corollary of independence. When you talk of independence, I mean you talk about national sovereignty. Interdependence is more or less opposite of sovereignty, with the result that globalization has always been seen as accompanying the erosioning of national sovereignty. So that's what interdependence. You don't depend on yourself. You are not independent, but you depend on one another. So that provides the logic for globalization. Sociologist Martin Elbro and Elizabeth King defined globalization as all those processes by which the people of the world are incorporated into a single world society. So there you go. In the consequences of modernity, Anthony Giddens writes, globalization can thus be defined as the intensification of worldwide social relations which link distant localities in such a way that local happenings are shaped by events occurring many miles away and vice versa. So, we are becoming one world, and events in one country, like I've been saying it previously, when event in one country impact on the other, the result that when I talk of The cost of living in the UK, as I did, I've been consistently reminding you that what happens in the UK is most likely to happen in Europe, in America, and also in Africa. So in 1992, Ronald Robertson, professor of sociology at the University of Aberdeen and an early writer in the field, described globalization as the compression of the world and in the intensification of the consciousness of the world as a whole. In Global Transformations, David Held and his in his co-writer state, although it is simplistic sense, although in its simplistic sense, globalization refers to the widening, deepening, and speeding up of global interconnection, such a definition begs further elaboration. Globalization can be seen uh, on a continuum with local, national, and regional. So they are connected, but to my mind, like I said before, it will coalesce as a global entity, world without border, the global village, and so on and so forth. At one end of the continuum lie social and economic relations and networks, which are organized on a local and or national basis. At the other end lie social and economic relations and networks which crystallize on the wide scale of regional and global interactions. Globalization can refer to those special temporal processes of change which underpin transformation in the organization of human affairs by linking together and expanding human activity across regions and continents. Without reference to site expansion special connections, there are expansive special connections. There can be no clear or coherent formulation of this term. A satisfactory definition of globalization must capture each of these elements: extensive and intensities, stretching, intensity, velocity, and impact. Eld and his co-writer's definition of globalization in that same book as transformation in the special organization of social relations and transaction assessment in terms of their intensity, velocity, and impact, generating transcontinental and inter-regional flows was called probably the most widely cited definition in the 2014 DHL Global Connectiveness Index. So it's gaining strength and momentum. It's becoming faster. The rate of change as to global economic integration is changing very quickly and with a lot of intensity. And when they talk of extensity, it's probably opposite of intensity. It's the process of world shrinkage, of distances getting shorter, things moving closer, like I said. It pertains to the increasing ease with which somebody on one side of the world can interact to mutual benefit with somebody on the other side of the world. So it's seen as being beneficial with people moving around, meeting other people, interacting with other people, also exchanging maybe information, goods. People go to wherever they want, with all these factors, maybe to shop or whatever. So globalization is the extension of social relations across the world space, defining that world space in terms of the historically variable ways that it has been practiced and socially understood through changing world time. Manfred Steger, professor of global studies and research leader in the Global Cities Institute of Remit University, identifies four main empirical dimensions on globalization: economic, political, cultural, and ecological, like I said previously. A fifth dimension, the ideological, cutting across The other four, ideological can be political, as well as a school of thinking, like in the think tank. So all the power of the world congregating as one. So the ideological dimension, according to Stagger, is filled with a range of norms, claims, beliefs, and narratives about the phenomenon itself. James James and Stagger stated that the concept of globalization emerged from the interaction of four interrelated sets of communities of practice. Wenger, 1998, academics, journalists, publishers, editors, and librarians. They note the term was used in education to describe the global life of the mind, in international relations to describe the extension of the European common market, and in journalism to describe how the American Negro and its problem are taking on a global significance. They note the term was used in education to describe the global life of the mind, in international relations to describe the extension of the European common market, and in journalism to describe how the American Negro and his problem are taking on a global. These are theoretical outlook of what now produced later on what is now the global system. They have also argued that four forms of globalization can be distinguished that complement and cut across the social empirical dimension. According to James, the oldest dominant form of globalization is embodied globalization, the movement of the people. We have spoken about that already. And the second form is agency extended globalization, the circulation of agents of different institutions, organizations, and polities, including imperial agents. Object extended globalization, the third form, is the movement of commodities and other objects of exchange. So, trade, for example, movement of the people, capital, and of goods. So it calls the transmission of ideas, images, knowledge, and information across one space, disembodiment, globalization, maintaining that it is currently the dominant form of globalization. This is talking about data, technology, information technology, and stuff like that. James holds that this series of distinctions allow for an understanding of how today the most embodied forms of globalization, such as the movement of refugees and migrants, are increasingly restricted, while the most disembodied forms, such as the circulation of the financial instruments and codes, are the most deregulated. So, the market economy, for example, when we talk about the financial infrastructure, you talk of freeing the market. It's liberalism, a liberalization of the economic system, done at the local, national level, is now being taken to a global dimension. The journalist Thomas L. Friedman popularized the term flat world, arguing that globalized trade, outsourcing, supply chaining, and political forces had permanently changed the world for better and for worse. It's the same thing what we're talking about. Different intersection, different viewpoints illustrating, shedding light to form a picture, to provide a landscape so that we can understand exactly what globalization look like from different perspectives. He asserted that the pace of globalization was quickening and that its impact on business organization and practice would continue to grow. So, like I said before, it's going faster and faster, and in magnitude also it's going bigger and better. Economists, Turkish, Fotopolis defined economic globalization as the opening and deregulation of commodity, capital, and labor that led toward present new liberal globalization. We talked about liberalization, which is actually the same with privatization, of freeing the private sector from the grip of the state. This is actually taking on a global dimension. We use political globalization to refer to the emergence of a transnational elite and a phasing out of the nation state. So you're looking at a nation state. You talk about sovereignty. We're talking about the ruling class. They are called elite. Meanwhile, use cultural globalization to reference the worldwide homogenization of culture. So if you talk about culture, as we discussed previously, it's actually the product of learning and practices involving people and families, communities, and group, the human equivalence of progressive dynamism. This is also taking on a global dimension. Other of its uses included ideological globalization, technological globalization, and social globalization. You talk of the ideology, technology, and social dimension. Lechner and Boyle 2012 defined globalization as more people across large distances becoming connected in more and different ways. So, globophobia is used to refer to the fear of globalization, though it can also mean the fear of balloons. But in essence, when people begin to travel freely, those who do not want strangers in their country will begin to. People come to Britain or go to Africa. That's what movement people is. Some people are actually afraid of it. It's called globophobia, fear of the global phenomenon or involving the movement of of people. So let us look at the history. We are coming to the 1 hour window is long video, so you're going to really enjoy yourself watching it. Please subscribe and support this video. Maybe let me stop here and attempt to look at the history. We are stopping at the globophobia as appropriately as it is actually instructive to know some of the potential risks and opportunities to do with globalization. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, leave a comment, and let me know your thought. This is actually the global dimension involving the cost of living. Thank you. Bye bye.